Hello and welcome to week 6 of our class. We are still in our bootcamp weeks and this week is lab 2. So far we learned about different Python skills like variables, collections, data types, if statements and loops. So we will be using these skills today to complete our lab 2 assignment, which I'll walk you through it step by step. But we do have one skill we need to learn about, which is a new library called Pandas. So I'll go over Pandas first. Then I'll cover the Lab 2 assignment, which will use this Pandas library. Alright, so first things first, what is Pandas? Well, Pandas is a Python library used for working with data sets. It's really an amazing library that makes working with data so much easier and faster. Pandas has functions for analyzing, cleaning, exploring, and manipulating data. And a very common question that is always asked, why is it called Pandas? Well, when I did my research, I found that the name Pandas has a reference to both panel data and Python data analysis. So I guess we can see how these words can be morphed into a catchier name like Pandas. And I believe we owe a huge debt of gratitude to a software developer by the name of Wes McKinney, who back in 2008 created and introduced Pandas to the world. It really makes a big difference when working with data to have this Pandas library available to us. And you'll see that in just a few moments. Alright, so we use Pandas because it allows us to analyze big data and make conclusions. Pandas can simply clean up messy data sets and make them readable and relevant, which is a key benefit as you can imagine. We go from raw data to information that we can use in our decision-making process. For example, Pandas can help us find correlation between two or more columns of data, and we can also quickly find average values or min and max in any column. We can also export datasets to Excel and CSV files. Now there are some new terminologies that we need to learn about when working with Pandas. I picked the 3 most common terms, which are series, labels, and data frames. So a Pandas series is like a column in a table. It is a one-dimensional list holding data of any type, like strings and integers. Then we have labels, which are basically identifiers for the values of our data. You see, in Pandas data tables, or data frames, each row also has a name, and this name is what we call a label. And by default, this label is just the row number. However, you can set one of your columns to be the index of your data frame, which means that its values will be used as row labels. We basically set the column name as our index. And if no labels are used, then it is defaulted to index numbers, where the first index item is 0, then the second item is index 1, and so on and so on. And the last term I wanted to share with you is data frame. A Pandas data frame is a 2-dimensional data structure, like a 2-dimensional list, for example. But in simplest terms, it's better described as just a table with rows and columns, as you can see from this image here. And the beauty and simplicity of data frames is that we can load files of data right into it, like a CSV file, and we can also send the data from the data frame to an outside source like a database. So very powerful stuff with very little lines of code. Now there's much more to Pandas than this brief presentation, but I'll leave that to another time and I'll move on to the assignment for this week. Here is the week 6 assignment, and we have just one assignment due. But before going to the week 6, I wanted to remind you that we have an announcement for free computer science tutoring that starts on Sunday. So if you open this announcement, basically it says that they do offer now on Sundays from 12 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. This is a drop-in session. You can drop in anytime you like. And this is the Zoom link. So please take full advantage of this. If you need any help, please log on to this Zoom drop-in sessions anytime, again from 12 to 9. And according to this line here, it says we've seen a huge correlation between student participation in tutoring and improved grades. So please take full advantage of this resource. Alright, so back to the week 6 module. Alright, we only have one assignment, and if we open that up, it basically gives us access to a lab 2 that we have to download, and when you click on that, it opens up into another window and provides us with 2 files, policies.csv and a Jupyter Notebook file. Okay, so please download both of them by clicking on 3 dot icons and then choosing download, or you can also just hover over here and click on this download icon as well. Alright, so please download both of them. Then I have opened the Jupyter Notebook, basically in VS Code. And again, just like previous Jupyter Notebooks, just please make sure that you read all the details in it and follow it step by step. Now this part of the Jupyter Notebook talks about modularization, which basically means creating functions or components or grouping your code so that you could handle it easier and be cleaner and functions better. And down here we have the code from last week, and basically just made up of one function, we can see here, and then a bunch of code. And then the text here basically says that we defined one function, but there are a couple other opportunities to use functions that we missed as well. So if we look at the code up here, we basically have one function and then a bunch of code lines. Now, if you just look at it from a categorical perspective, well, you can say, okay, well, perhaps I can put this bunch of lines of code into one function and then maybe group this into another function as well. All right, so that's what it's talking about here. And then says, here's what it would look like if we do this. So if we scroll down, we now have the original handle request function. This hasn't changed, but then anything that had to do with the checking the username, we basically put it into its own function. And then the chatbot as well, where it, we say what's your name, and then we asked if you want to do another request, we put that into a separate function. So now we have three functions instead of just having one function, and then the rest of it is all just a bunch of unrelated code. And then we come to our very first challenge, and it's asking us in the code box below, rewrite the chatbot from above, but remove the functionality for checking the name of the user. Remember to remove any reference to checking the user's name. So basically what we need to do is come up here, let's click, and I'm going to do a Command A or Control A to highlight all the code, and then a Command C to copy it. And come down here in this code cell, I'm going to do Control V to paste it. Okay, so now I just copied the code from here into the challenge code cell here. And it says to remove any functionality that has to do with the name of the user. So now that we have a function called checkUser, this is the function that we need to get rid of. Remember, a function, when it's defined, so this is just the definition of a function, this is useless unless some code calls the function by its name. So if you check any code here that calls the checkUser, you're basically going to find it here. Okay, so I need to comment out this line, and if I comment out this line, then basically it's going to not call this function here. So I'm going to comment this line out, and anything that has to do with the name also, so comment this line out as well. Now notice here that the rest of this code was indented as part of this if statement. So I could now outdent it, so it's no longer indented under the if statement. Okay. Now technically you can stop there, but since you know that you're not going to be using the checkUser function, then we can also comment this entire block of code out because we're not going to be using the checkUser anymore. And if we scroll down here, okay, now if that works successfully, then your chatbot should have two functions, handle request and chatbot. Okay, so here is handle request. This is commented out, and here's chatbot. So far this looks good. And should ask the user what the user wants help with twice. Okay, so let's run this and see. What should you like help with? So let's do vacation. And down here you're allowed 15 vacation days. Okay, is there anything else you'd like help with? I'm just gonna say yes, and then contact, hit enter, and there we go. It ran twice and stopped. So far we are good. Then it says, what if we wanted to learn about all three different policies? Well, we could do another if-else statement inside the chatbot. So here we have the different if-else statements. If vacation, do this. If it's contact, do that. If it's location, do this. Else, do that. All right. So that's good. But what happened if we had 100 policies? Are we going to ask 100 questions or 100 if statements? Well, that's not really very efficient. And so we've learned about loops already. So we could start to incorporate loops into our code. Now here is a loop that we can use for our problem. Basically we say while true. So while true basically is a true statement forever until something makes this true a false. So while true, yes it is true, true is true, then enter this indented code and run it until something breaks out of the block. And so if we look at this code line by line, once this is true, which it is, we're going to prompt the user, which would you like help with, vacation, contact, location, or exit. And then we have the if statements. If request is vacation, do this, and so on. And then down here, if you notice, we have a new option, which is exit. And if that user does type exit, then we're going to print thank you for using this chatbot, and then we're going to break. So the break, what we learned before from previous weeks, is that it's a way to exit out of the while loop. It basically turns a true into a false. So if you run this, what would you like help with? Let's do vacation. Okay, let's do vacation again. Let's do contact. Let's do location. See, it keeps running the loop until something exits out of the loop. And thankfully we have an exit option. If I hit enter now, then we exit out of the loop because we broke out of the loop. Okay, so this is a nice while loop to help us with our code. Now for our next challenge, it says in the code below, rewrite the full chatbot code, but this time use the code from above, which is this while loop. Use the code from above as the contents of your handle request function, and note that you shouldn't need to explicitly ask for another request in the chatbot function anymore. So let's take the first step of copying the code that we had from before, which is this guy here. I'm going to click on it anywhere, do a Control A or Command A, and then copy it, Command C. Scroll down here to the challenge code cell, paste it, and then in our handle request, we are going to change, copy all that, copy the loop as is, and then replace the existing code here with this loop. So I'm going to erase this code, and I'm going to paste the loop that I just copied from above. Now you might need to do some cleanup work for the indentation to work, so let's see if we can do that quickly. There we go. Now indentation again is very, very important in Python, so make sure that you have everything lined up correctly. So in the definition, we indent for the next line, which is a while loop, and then anything in the while loop needs to be also indented. And the next update to this code is that now that we have this while loop, then I don't need to ask the user for another attempt to run this code. So I'm going to comment out this code, and basically, yep, the only thing left really is just the chatbot function is just going to call the handle request function. Okay, so if you implemented the last challenge correctly, your program should be looking pretty efficient, around 18 lines of functional code. All right, let's double check. Are we on the right track? So we have this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So pretty close, okay? Now, when you comment out code, technically it's not going to be used. So you could, if you want, you can delete the code, or you can just keep it commented out as you like. It all depends on you. Me personally, I like to keep it commented out until I test it and everything works fine, and then I start deleting code. But that's how I do things. You could do it differently as you like. All right, let's move down. Talks about data types. So here it's going to talk about using dictionaries for our data. And basically here we have a dictionary called responses. And again, dictionaries are basically key value pairs. So here's the first key and its value. Next key, its value. Last key and its value. Okay. And again, this is a dictionary because first of all, it's in squiggly braces, and then key value pairs. And we separate them by colons, and we separate the key value pairs from each other by commas. The very last one, you don't need a comma. Okay. Now to call on the value of any key, you basically say print and then call the dictionary name, use square brackets followed by the name of the key that you want to call. So if I run this code, again, I'm defining a dictionary with all this data in it, and then I'm going to print out not all the dictionary, but just the value of the contact key. Here is contact, so its value is this. So if I run this block of code, I get you can contact HR at so and so, which is correct. All right. So we come to our next challenge, and it says in the code below, rewrite your chatbot program again. So I'm going to copy and paste from above. Let's do that now. Okay, click on the code, highlight all of it, copy it, come down to the challenge cell, paste it. Okay, and let's see what the instructions say. So copy the chat program, defining a dictionary of policies at the top of your code. All right, so at top of our code, I'm going to come here, to this code cell, highlight all, copy it, come down here, right before my first definition of a function, I'm going to paste it. So now I have a dictionary of responses. And then it says, then updating your handle request function to access relevant information for user's query. Remember to keep checking if a user wants to exit the program. You don't need to add an exit to your dictionary. So now that I have my dictionary up here, I need to come down here, and then in the handle request function, I don't need all this anymore, because all this is going to be replaced with the use of my dictionary. So I'm going to replace this with saying if request is equal to, if request is in responses, okay, and responses is this dictionary, then I want to print out, well, actually, I just need to copy this. Actually, I'm going to cut it because it doesn't belong here. I'm going to cut it, so Control X, come down here. So if request is in responses, colon, enter, indented, and then paste. All right, so what this is going to do is, request is whatever the user enters here, vacation, contact, location, exit. So vacation is here, contact is here, location is here, and each has its own value. So if request is in responses, so whatever I type here, if it's part of this dictionary keys, then it's going to print the responses followed by, actually this needs to be replaced with request. Okay, so the responses is the name of the dictionary, and then request is the name of the key. Now, which key is it? Well, whatever the user types. If the user types vacation, it's going to find the vacation here, if it's in responses, and it's going to print the value. If the user types contact, then it's going to find in the responses dictionary the request, which is this time is contact, so it's going to go up to that dictionary and find contact, and then return the value of that request key. Okay, so I was able to shrink my code into just this one if statement and using the responses dictionary. And just to confirm, let's run it. Okay, which would you like? Let's try vacation. Hit enter. Oh, okay, so basically I think I added, yeah, there we go. I don't need a, this is a variable, not a string. Request is this variable here. Okay, let's try this again. Run it. Vacation, hit enter. Okay, scroll down. Yep, I got the right output. Let's try contact. Enter. Yep, right output. Location. Enter. Yep, right output. And let's exit. And we're done. Okay, so this code seems to have run correctly by adding this dictionary and using it in this if statement. And it's dynamic enough because it's getting the data from here. So I don't need multiple if statements anymore. Let's go to the next part. Okay, files. Now, it's nice that we have multiple items we can use here. But again, it's not very best programming practices to have your code in the file. You want to have your data basically outsourced somewhere else, like in a file. Okay, now there are different ways we can work with files in Python. One of them is we can use the Pandas library, which we talked about earlier. So the assignment gives us an access to a policies.csv file. All right, that's one of the two files that we downloaded here. Okay, now let me open up this policy CSV file. I'm going to open up in a text editor. So this file actually needs to be edited just slightly because it doesn't conform to proper formatting, meaning that some of the values don't have double quotes. So I'm going to add a double quote here, and also misspelling. Here is a misspelling as well. Insurance. And it also needs to be surrounded with double quotes. And this needs to be double quote. And this needs to also end in a double quote. Alright, so all the values are surrounded by double quotes now. Double quotes and double quotes. double quotes. Correct. So that takes care of that. Make sure you just make this update before you start working with a file. And here now in the next code cell is saying that we're going to be using the Pandas library, and when you use an outside library or a module, you need to import it using the import keyword followed by the name of the library. So I'm going to say import pandas. Okay. Now again, pandas allow us to work with data sets, and here is a function that basically says, well, it's called load underscore responses underscore from underscore CSV. It takes one parameter called file name, and what it does is it calls the pandas library, and inside the pandas library we have a method called read underscore CSV, which, as you can guess, it's going to read data from a CSV file. We pass the file name here, and what this is going to do is it's going to create a panda data frame, and what that data frame is going to be assigned to a variable called df, which is a variable name that you can make up, but df is short for data frame. Again, you can call it anything you want. This is a variable name, but what this does is it takes data from a file, it reads data from a file, and then dumps it into a panda data frame. We assign this data frame into a variable called df so we could use it. Now I'm going to create another variable called responses, and it's going to be assigned to the same data frame that I just created, but I'm going to convert it to a dictionary. Why convert it to dictionary? So I could use it in my code, my Python code. Dictionary is a data type. Data frame is not a Python data type. So I'm going to convert all this data from the data frame, which is data from the policies file. I'm going to convert it to a dictionary using the to_dict method. So again, that's how powerful pandas is. You could take data, you could convert it, you can read from it, you can dump it to a database, you can do so many things to it, just with a few lines of code. Now this method here, the set index to, remember pandas uses indexes, which are labels, and it uses by default the 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on. But I don't want to use numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 as my index values. I want to use the actual keyword, which are these guys here. This is what I want to make the index as my keywords, and then the responses are going to be the values here. Okay, so that's what this line of code does. It's going to set my index to use the keyword and response combination from the data frame that I created from this file, which is going to be policies eventually. And then whatever this data frame is, after I have modified it to use the correct syntax at the correct index, then I'm going to convert it to a dictionary and then assign all that data to a variable called responses, then print out or return the responses to the function call. So that's the definition of the function and what it does. This is going to be pointless if I don't call it. So down here in my regular code, I'm going to call this function. I'm going to pass it an argument, which is the name of the file, policies.csv, and then it's going to run through this function. Then it's going to return the responses, and I'm going to assign it to this variable responses. Then, just to check my work if it's correct or not, I'm just going to print it out and see what I get. Okay, so let's run this and see what happens. And I get back exactly what I expected, which is a dictionary of key value pairs. So here's my first key and its value. Scroll to the right. Here's my second key and its value. Scroll more to the right. Oh, there's location also and its value, and then we have insurance. So now we know that we are reading in the right file. So far so good. Let's go back here, scroll down. So there are a few components to explain here. Okay, so basically this is the same code again, just as above here, but now they just have some comments to explain what each one does, each line does. All right, so I've already explained that part to you. All right, next challenge is rewrite your chatbot code. All right, so let's go up to our latest and greatest chatbot code from last. This is it, right? Yep. Okay, so click anywhere. Control A, Control C, scroll down to the challenge cell. Okay, click here, paste it. All right, so we pasted the code below. And use the code above, which is this code here, to replace the dictionary with a new function called load responses from CSV that takes that input file name and opens that file as a CSV and returns a dictionary of its input. Then call that function later to generate the dictionary you use for responses so that your chatbot operates using the data from the CSV file. And to check if it works, see if it can handle the request insurance, which is a policy that only exists in the CSV file. All right, so we need to basically not have responses here anymore because we're going to be calling it from the file. So let's get rid of this. And then I'm going to come here. I'm going to, well, I need this function here. I'm going to import also the pandas line. So I'm going to copy that, come down here, paste it. So now I have this. And next it says replace the dictionary with a, yep, that's what we did. Then takes the file name, yep, that's what we did, and open the file. All right, so, okay, actually I also am going to need this file, or sorry, this line, copy it, because I want to call it, I want to call this function. Let's paste it down here. So what I did here is I copied all this, pasted it, and I also copied this. I didn't need to copy the print statement because I don't want to prove to myself that I am getting the correct file anymore. But I do need to run this line because this is the line that's going to call this function. And I'm going to call it at the very top because I want to load all the policies into this code cell so that it's ready to be used with the rest of the code down here. And is there anything else we have to do? Call the function. There, call that function later to generate the dictionary. Yep, so that you and we did that. Check. Okay, so let's run this code now and see if it handles what we want to handle. So the text line still says vacation, contact, location, or exit. It doesn't say insurance, but we know that we have insurance in our policies file. And we should have loaded the policies file because we have this code function call. So let's do insurance, spell it correctly, hit enter, and let's scroll down in the output. And there we go. Details regarding insurance policy can be accessed via your pay portal. So it looks like it worked. And just to confirm that we can still get the other ones, let's do contact, hit enter. Yep, you can see the output correctly down here. And let's exit, and it exits. So far, everything worked. Okay. All right, so here it says then, you know, it's nice to have the data now in a separate file and not part of our code, but for policies still isn't many. What if we wanted to add a new policy without having to edit the CSV file directly? So instead of me going into the CSV file, opening it up, and then adding a new key value pair, I want to be able to do it programmatically from within my code. So the code below writes a new policy to the CSV file, and it's about paternity leave. And let's test it. Well, let's first try to understand what it is. So we're going to import the pandas. I have a variable called file name. It's equal to policies.csv, which is the file I want to work with. Then it has a variable called keyword, which is equal to paternity, and a variable called response, which is equal to this. Then we have a function defined called write new policy to CSV. And it takes three parameters. It takes the file name, which is this guy here. It takes keyword, which is this, response, which is that. Okay. Then it's going to create a new policy, and it's going to create it in a dictionary format. Again, why is it dictionary format? Because our data is going to be stored as a dictionary, and it's using the braces, and it's using the key value pair option. Once we created the new policy, then we are going to create a new data frame and pass the new policy information into this data frame. So now that we have a data frame with this new policy in it, then we're going to call that data frame and then call the method of the data frame called toCSV. So before we had a method called readCSV, which read data to populate the data frame. Now we already have a data frame with the data populated with this new policy, but now we want to go the other way around, which is send that data in the data frame to a CSV file. And that CSV method, toCSV method takes a few arguments. First of all, well, what file do you want to send the data to? What mode do you want to use? Because there are different modes, and the A is for append. Append basically means you want to add the data to the file and not overwrite. For the header argument, we're going to use false because I don't want to add any header information, meaning the column title, which is right now keyword and response. I don't want to touch that. I want to keep that the same. And then for the index, which is, remember, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, I don't want to use an index because I want to use the keyword as my index. So that's the function defined. And then we have a function call, because without this function call, this function is useless. No one's going to call it. No one's going to use it. So here I have a function call. I'm going to call this function by its name. I'm going to pass it the expected 3 arguments, which is the file name, the keyword, and the response. And these are defined up here. Okay, so when I call this, file name is going to be policies.csv, keyword is going to be paternity, and response is going to be this. So all this data is going to run. It's going to call this function, then it's going to execute these 3 lines of code. What this should do is it should open up my policies file, and then it should add these 2, well, not these 2, but this 1 key value pair. It's going to have a new line for policy, a new line for paternity, I'm sorry, and then comma followed by paternity leave is 4 months, so on and so on. So let's test this out and see what happens. Okay, I get a check mark, meaning that everything ran. There's no errors. So let's double check our policies file, and there we go. Let me just expand that a bit, enlarge it, and paternity has been added to this. Alright, so now that we've verified this part works, let's move on to our final challenge. So the final challenge basically says rewrite your chatbot code below using the code above to write a function called write new policy to CSV. So basically we want to be able to update our code to use this latest functionality here so that we can add new policies without having to modify the policies.csv file directly. So I'm going to go back to my latest code, which I think is this one. Yep. Click anywhere, Control A, Control C, scroll down to the final challenge cell, click and paste. And then I want to go to this code here, and I want to select all of it and copy it. And come down here. I'm going to erase import pandas and paste over it. And now I don't need keyword and responses anymore. I don't need these 2 lines because I'm going to basically use the code, which is this function here, to create my own new policies. Okay, now that we have the function defined, it says here we have to update the handler request function so that if a user writes new policy, they are asked for a keyword for the policy and the description of the policy. And then the write new policy to CSV function is used, which is this guy here, to add the list of policies in the CSV. So we have the function here, but we need to update the handle request. So we have an if request is in responses and elif request exit. I'm going to add a new elif, and I already wrote it. I'm just going to paste it here just for shortness of time. So I have an elif request is equal to new policy. Okay, then I'm going to collect a new input from a user by prompting what is the name of the new policy. I'm going to save that to a keyword variable, and then I'm going to prompt them again what is the response. I'm going to save that into an answer variable. Then I'm going to call the write new policy to CSV, pass it the file name, which is defined up here, and then file the keyword, which is defined here, and then pass also the answer argument, which is defined here. Okay, and I need to move this, get rid of it. Alright, so importing pandas, have this. These are the function definitions. I could actually move this as well so it's not kind of hidden between the different functions. Put it down here. Alright, so up here I just have all my functions. Here's the function, here's another function, here's another function, here's another function. And then I'm going to call this line of code, which is going to load all the policies into a dictionary. And then I'm going to call chatbot, which is this function here, which calls handle request, which runs this. So everything looks good so far. Let's run this. Okay, let's try just testing the regular stuff. Vacation, scroll, yep. Okay, now let's try new policy. Hit enter. And there we go. What is the name of the new policy? Let's say policy 7. Hit enter. What is the response? Good. let's say response is blah blah blah, and hit enter. Okay, and now let's exit, and let's double check our CSV file. There we go, policy 7 has been added. Okay, and let's also test it. Policy 7, scroll down, and there we go, response is blah blah blah. Okay, let's exit, and we are done. So for the submitting part, just make sure that you submit the Jupyter Notebook file and also the link by using the share option, so you can get the link as well. Alright, so I hope this was helpful. Again, if you have any questions, please reach out to me either through the Canvas inbox, through the regular email, or through the Q&A forum, and I'll be more than happy to help out. So thank you for watching. I'll be seeing you in class. Take care, and bye for now.